How's it going, YouTube? Today we're going to be watching a Fat Electrician video about the Berlin Wall. Some people within the Discord have recommended me watching some of his videos. If you have any other recommendations, consider leaving them down in the comments and maybe joining the Discord or watching the stream. But without further ado, let's get into it.
People are probably going to get mad and call this video propaganda, but in my defense, it's not my fault. The only thing you have to do to make anti-communist propaganda is to open a history book and start reading it out loud.
How the fact that like people are still like really into communism, like has communism ever fully worked? Isn't the common joke of like, oh, but that wasn't true communism. That wasn't real communism. Look, what did JFK say? That the system we have may not be perfect, but it has never forced us to build a wall to keep our citizens in. So yeah, it's not perfect, but it's better than the alternative.
Today we're talking about the Berlin Wall. It is one of the greatest examples of capitalism versus communism, East versus West, hungry versus fed that the world has ever seen. But first, a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Operation Good Boy. It's a monthly subscription box. It's got all kinds of good... Are you okay?
Good boy.
Don't puke in my office, please. Yeah,
that's a good boy.
A second, if you don't puke. Okay, hang on, 1 second.
This is the peak of the video right here. I'm not even joking.
Anyways, it comes with all kinds of cool stuff for your dog. We've got dog poop picker-upper bags. We've got a little doggy first aid kit. We've got daily multivitamins for him. And then we've got Mushu's favorite, the TRE, the treats ready to eat. These are made right here in America. And Mushu is a big fan, right? Give me a shake. Good, you didn't puke. Wonderful work. Go ahead. So yeah, if you've got a dog, go check out Operation Good Boy. I'll have a link and a discount code in the description down below. Let's get back to the video. All right, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the biggest logistical flex of all time, that being the Berlin airlift, when the USSR...
He has a video on that one? Okay, another time we have to watch that video. I love the Berlin airlift. Oh my god. Dude, the efficiency and all the shit they had to do to stuff all of the food inside of those planes and the precision they had to do, and eventually they were actually doing a surplus, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, we have to watch that video at some point.
Tried to blockade off West Berlin to force them to become communist and to join the USSR, and America and the UK teamed up to deliver them supplies using only cargo planes, landing a cargo plane into West Berlin every 2 minutes, all day, every day for 15 months straight, feeding and supplying an entire city with 4.6 billion pounds of supplies. If you want to watch that full video, I'll have that linked right here. If not, that's fine. Here's the bare minimum background info that you need. Right after World War II, Germany was basically split into two pieces. You had the Western...
excuse me, sir, but there are 4 on that map. I'm joking. It's obviously the East and West.
Powers, America, the UK, and France controlling the western half of Germany, and you had the USSR controlling the eastern half. And here's where that gets weird. They did the same exact thing with the city of Berlin, where the West controlled the western half and the USSR controlled the eastern half, except Berlin was 100 miles into the USSR territory. And this is why the USSR blockaded off West Berlin and tried to force them to join, because they didn't want a little speck of capitalism in their communist utopia. But the West isn't about to back down from a challenge, so America and the UK team up, Wonder Twin powers activate, they launch the Berlin airlift, they feed an entire city using nothing but cargo planes, and after 15 months, the USSR is finally forced to end the blockade because they can't afford to try to stop them anymore. So
was that before or after like the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that? This was way before, if I'm not mistaken. Like this was before they had the blundering incident with JFK, or was it not? I get my timelines mixed up with all this. Okay, yes, I thought so, Corn. Thank you. I get that why they had to split up the capital, because you can't just split it in a way that you also split the capital perfectly while keeping half the capital on the western side. But man, when they were making that deal, you know, the US, France, and Britain, they had to be like, well, this is a shitty situation for the capital. This is going to be used against us at some point, and it did.
So 1949, the roads and railways to West Berlin open back up and everything goes back to working exactly how it was supposed to, and this is where the story really begins. From 1949 to 1951, we had what was known as a green border between East and West Germany. Basically, there was a border there. They're two separate countries. However, it was very, very easy to go from one country to the other and back. It was no big deal at all, which was really important because you have to remember, they just drew an arbitrary line right through the middle of Germany and were like, hey, these are two separate countries now. It was really complicated for a lot of people. You had people that had family members that now live in a different country. You had people whose home was in one country and job was in the other. You had farmers and property owners that now owned property in a country that they didn't live in. It was very, very complicated. And
okay, and before he gets to that, I just want to see if I'm right, if I can predict this, because I'm trying to remember if I know my history as well. Was the Berlin Wall built up because of the slip up of JFK saying, like, you have the East and we have the West? And then it's like, oh, so you're like officially saying it of like, this is my own thing. Okay, and we're going to have a wall and stuff like that. Or was that after the fact? Let's see.
And while the border is essentially open, a ton of people from East Germany are taking advantage of it and migrating to West Germany because it's way, way better to live in West Germany.
Better
where
lights,
the
better
evil
electricity.
capitalist pigs from America and the UK have been funneling in billions of dollars worth of food, money, and resources, helping to build West Germany back up as a country, as opposed to the USSR over in East Germany, who has done the exact opposite because they said, hey, we want our war reparations and we want them right now. The USSR takes over $10 billion worth of hard assets and natural resources out of the East German economy and ships it back home. That is a third of the working capital of the entire country.
Holy
Quite literally
shit.
just took a third of their economy and got rid of it. And if that wasn't bad enough, they also liquidated almost every factory in East Germany. They took all of the machinery, all the parts, all the material that they had and shipped it back home to the USSR. Not only have they stripped East Germany of all of their product, they've stripped them of their ability to produce. They can't even work themselves out of this difficult situation. Because of this, understandably so, people start leaving East Germany in droves. Now, by 1952, the USSR identifies this problem, understanding, oh shit, obviously our policies aren't very popular. We should probably do something about that. The only question is, what are we gonna do about it? Do we A, come up with new policies that incentivize people to stay, making them want to be there and making them want to be a productive member of this society? No, absolutely not. We're gonna go.
That's ridiculous. Guys, capitalism never works. That's why every other main alternative was also usually fallen into a dictatorship. You're not saying that capitalism is perfect. It's absolutely not. And even the capitalism that we have within the USA, I think could definitely be better and definitely improved, but capitalism nonetheless. And you can ask the AI Cynthia after the reaction video, Michael. The actual wall part was mostly in Berlin, hence the Berlin Wall. The rest used fenced and gun towers. Right, yeah, yeah, let me clarify. I didn't think the wall actually went through the entirety of the border between the two countries. It definitely is just mostly within Berlin, but they did have like things to then separate the two sides, but it wasn't a literal wall. We're doing 5 nights after this.
Option B, old reliable, good old-fashioned human rights violations. Okay, so here's the plan. We're gonna shut down the border between East and West Germany. We're gonna build a wall or a fence. And I know what you're thinking, walls don't work. Well, if the wall doesn't work, you know what is gonna work? The landmines that we put on the other side of it. And if that doesn't work, we're gonna get guard dogs. And if the guard dogs don't work, we're gonna put up a bunch of guard towers and we're gonna have over 20,000 men with guns watching the border 24/7 all the time. And they have the authority to shoot anyone trying to escape on sight. Now, obviously, there's one glaring hole in this plan. What if somebody is able to get past the wall, navigate through a minefield, evade the dogs, and they get seen by the guard, but because the guard is an East German, and he probably doesn't want to be in East Germany either, what if the guard just doesn't shoot him and lets him go over to West Germany? Well, that's where the giant sand pit comes in.
When he started talking and he said, I thought he was going to say snake pit. I thought he was going to say, oh, that's where the snake pit comes in. It's like, oh, I didn't know this part of the history. No, sand pit. Okay, all right. And while walls on their own do not work, obviously, because you can just go over them, dig under them, break through them, and stuff like that, there has to be extra infrastructure around it, most definitely. And this kind of proves that it does. No wall will ever stop everybody, obviously. But it's not really about stopping everyone. If the goal is to prevent 100% of something, then nothing should ever be done because it will always fail. But it got most of them. I think that's most of them.
We're going to line the entire
border between
East
East
and
West
Germany
snakes for a pit
with
that
a
size?
30-foot wide
Not with that
pad
attitude.
of sand. And that way we'll be able to see any footprints when somebody runs out of East Germany into the West. And then we're going to know that somebody escaped, and we're going to hold the guard on duty for that sector responsible, and then he's going to get in trouble. Buh! Having a very secure border isn't a human rights violation. Buh! Well, right, when you're using it to keep people out, but when you're using it to keep people in, it's absolutely a human rights violation, according to the Universal Declaration.
There were tunnels dug between the two sides. Oh, yep. And it was grueling labor just to be able to set up those tunnels. Dangerous because they could collapse at any moment, so you had to smuggle in equipment to keep up the tunnels to go between them. Smuggling in electricity so you could see while you're in the tunnels that they were digging under there, to have little light bulbs underneath it to then smuggle food and people and resources in and out to get people out of the east side to the west side, or get supplies from the west over to the east because maybe someone can't fit or someone can't, move or something like that, because I may be making this up. I may be wrong on this, but there were issues of maybe some people would escape, but not everyone within a family. And then that would be kind of, suspect. And then they may try to figure out how the hell they got out of there. There were more stable on the west side than the east. Yeah, pretty much everything, even the escape holes, were better on the west because, better resources. Also, a lot easier to dig a tunnel if you're well fed.
Declaration of Human Rights. Let me just read that for you. Article 13, Section 2, quote, everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country, end quote. So yes, turning an entire country into a prison and refusing to let anyone leave while you oppress them is in fact a human rights violation. Yep. However, to be completely intellectually honest, I do have to tell you that the Soviet Union is one of only 3 nations that refused to sign the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
There you go. They didn't break any laws.
They refused to sign it specifically because of Article 13, Section 2, which I just read to you. They basically said that they would only consider signing it if this was added to the end of Article 13. Quote, in accordance with the procedure laid down in each country, end quote. They were unanimously declined because that would ruin the entire point of Article 13, which would basically just mean that, yeah, you have a human right to leave a country unless that country tells you you can't. So what's the point of even having that as a human right? So the border is pretty much completely shut down. The only exceptions to that are the fact that you
How many languages can my AI translate? I have no idea.
However, it's very expensive. You get interrogated by the government, and the only people to actually get these visas awarded to them are people that are working on behalf of the Communist Party, or somebody that is obscenely rich and is for sure coming back anyways, which seems like a weird hypocritical policy for a communist regime whose ultimate goal is to have a moneyless, classless society where everybody is treated equally to have, but what?
Hey, but some people, everyone is created equal. Just some people are created more equal, That's that. I don't know if that's more than just an Animal Farm reference, but it's at least from Animal Farm.
And then, of course, they have to allow travel from West Germany into West Berlin. And to do that, there's very, very strict routes anybody traveling from West Germany to West Berlin has to take. And they have to go straight from one, straight to the other. And they hit multiple checkpoints along the way. And this is extremely important because it opens up the Berlin loophole, because Berlin, the city that's 100 miles into communist territory, has that little speck of capitalism in it. And there's no border between West Berlin and East Berlin. So you can literally just walk from East Berlin right into West Berlin, and it's not an issue at all. So that becomes the only way to escape East Germany. People travel to East Berlin and then simply walk into West Berlin, and then they catch a car or a train or a bus from West Berlin to West Germany, and then they never go back. And between 1952 and 1961, somewhere between 2 and 4 million people do this. Bear in mind, East Germany only has a population of 17 million. That's over 20% of the population walks into West Berlin and never comes back. And of the people that did leave, they were disproportionately young, highly skilled, highly intelligent people like doctors, lawyers, skilled tradesmen, engineers. And because of this, this got the nickname the brain drain. So in 1961,
it isn't that, quote, don't correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that even still, it's not an issue in other countries for that, but isn't that still like a thing that we see to this day within like US and other Western countries of like a lot of people that are from other areas of poorer areas, but someone has like a very good degree or an engineer or a doctor, everything, going to the US, going to England, going to England or France or something like that, definitely within the US, to then pursue their medical practice or their engineering practice because of a higher pay. And then they're leaving an area where maybe they went to college, maybe in another country, and then all the way, and then they moved or immigrated to America, for example. That's still like even a thing today. The brain drain was the epitomis for the Berlin Wall. Yeah, because the Berlin Wall was just we are hemorrhaging so many people. We need to keep them in. We need to force them to stay. Okay, welcome, Red. Welcome, Red.
USSR is like, oh shit, this is a humongous problem. All the young, smart people are leaving. We got to do something about this. Should we, I don't know, incentivize highly successful young people to want to stay here? Nah. Break out old reliable, more human rights violations for everybody. So, August 13th, 1961,
like Oprah,
in the middle of the
with
night, a bunch of East
violations.
German construction workers and cops show up with guns, and they put a fence all the way around West Berlin. Not to keep the West Berliners in, but to keep the East Berliners out. And
wait, he may have said that and I just didn't hear it. Didn't that like pop up within like a night? It all happened in a night of like one day you go to bed, there's nothing separating the two sides. Then you wake up the next morning, boom, there's barbed wire, there's a fence, there's like, obviously not a wall yet. But then boom, there's something there, just whoop, what's going on? And then over time, they obviously built the wall up. Exactly? Okay, I thought so. He may have said that and I just didn't hear it.
East and West Berlin at this point in time were still very much intertwined. There were people that lived in the East and worked in the West and vice versa, and there were people that had family members on one side or the other side, and there were people that owned businesses and property. There were people that were seeing relatives and got separated from their families, and they weren't allowed to get back on the other side of the wall. There were literally thousands of people in Berlin that woke up one day and it was just like, congratulations, you just lost your job, you just lost your property,
Jesus.
You lost your business, you're now separated from your family. Because of this,
imagine if you had like a kid spending the night at a friend's house on the other side. Oh, guys, like, fuck, no. Wow, my baby boy, he's stuck on the other side. No.
People started trying to break into West Berlin, or they were breaking out into East Berlin to get people and bring them back into West Berlin. At first it was easy because it was just a fence and you could cut your way through it or you could scale it, but that fence rapidly turned into a 12-foot high concrete wall. And then when people started bringing ladders to scale over the top of it, they added a gigantic round metal top to it so there was nothing to grip and pull yourself over. And then they added barbed wire and guard towers and guards that were allowed to shoot you on sight and turned it into a full-on demarcation line around West Berlin. And that is when the escape attempts got incredibly creative. One of the more popular ones at the very beginning was that somebody from West Berlin would remove the gas tank from their car and they would just have a little 1-gallon jug for gas, just enough gas to drive into East Berlin, pick somebody up, and drive back to the West. And
that's
the person
amazing.
would be strapped up underneath the car where the gas tank was supposed to be. But then the communists figured that out, and then they had the guards at every checkpoint before a car could go into.
Who said that competition doesn't breed creativity and ingenuity? That's pretty creative right there because of the competition between, people and the fucking communists. Also, this area became a major point of contention in the Cold War to the point that multiple incidents took place at the Berlin Wall that almost caused World War III. Oh yeah. It was especially as during the lead up to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yeah. It's like, oh, tanks are on both sides. Slowly, let's move them back. Let's not start World War III.
West Berlin, they would take a flexible metal wire and shove it down into where the gas tank should be to make sure it was in fact a gas tank. So then that plan was out. So one guy decided he was going to take his BMW Isetta, cut the roof off, and then he was just going to drive right underneath the checkpoint going full speed, and he was going to duck, and that's how he was going to break into West Berlin, and that's exactly what he did. And because of this, the East Germans added spike strips and barricades to every checkpoint. Every time somebody escaped into West Berlin, the communists fixed however it was possible. They made it more and more difficult, and the escape attempts got more and more creative. Some of my personal favorites include shooting a steel cable over the wall from a high building and then ziplining to the other side. Having somebody from West Berlin get a cow costume and tow a cattle trailer into East Berlin and then have 2 of his friends dress up in the cow.
That's a cow costume? That's so good. I mean, the spots are a little spotty, if you know. But that's... I was convinced until I saw the feet. I was like, oh, that's a cow. That's a cow right there. Nope.
costume and stand in the cattle trailer as they made it through the checkpoint, stealing a tank and trying to drive it through the wall. And when you got away from the Berlin Wall itself and you actually went to the East and West German border, the escape attempts got even crazier. One group of brothers took a farmer's crop duster, painted it like a Soviet MiG plane, flew it from West Germany into East Germany, picked up their other brother and flew him back. And my absolute personal favorite escape from communism was when two fathers got together and for a year and a half gathered fabric and propane and supplies so that they could build a fucking hot air balloon to escape to West Germany. Okay, I'm gonna say that again.
How did, I hope he tells me, but how the hell did that not get shot down immediately?
But a little bit slower. 8 people, 2 families, 2 fathers, 2 mothers, and 4 children escaped communism using a hot air balloon. Do you understand the gravity of what I've just told you? Because
I'm very impressed that they could get that hot air balloon off the ground with how massive those 2 fathers' balls must have weighed. That is impressive they would get any lift whatsoever carrying so much extra weight from their cojones. From the History Channel of the Berlin Wall escape, Wolfgang Eagles, a 19-year-old East German soldier who would help build the barbed wire fences that initially separated both Berlin, stole a tank and drove it through the wall itself. Despite being caught in the barbed wire and being shot twice, Ingalls managed to escape. What the fuck? That's amazing.
As a husband and a dad, it speaks volumes to me that 2 men in my situation got together, looked around, and said these living conditions are so horrific that the best bet for me and you and our wives and our kids is to secretly gather up a bunch of cotton fabric, aka flammable shit, sew it into a balloon, attach it to a wicker basket, more flammable shit, and then propel it with a fucking flamethrower as we try to get away as fast as the wind will take us while the guards are shooting at us. Okay, look, all I'm saying is I've never seen anybody that determined to escape capitalism. That's all I'm saying.
True.
But that's not real communism. Of course it's not, because it's never real
He said a thing.
Communism whenever something goes bad. But whenever something goes bad under capitalism, it's 100% capitalism's fault, and we should get rid of it and do communism instead.
Absolutely.
Granted, communism every other time we've tried it's ended in genocide and murder and human rights violations. But
that
hey,
wasn't real.
I'm feeling it this time,
That wasn't
guys.
real communism, obviously.
We're this close. Just 1, maybe 2 more genocides, and we're going to have that communist utopia. We should keep trying. I can't. I need a beer. Jesus.
Need a beer.
Sorry, I got carried away. I apologize. Anyways, the wall around Berlin gets more and more impenetrable, and eventually the only way to actually escape into West Berlin is to dig a tunnel and crawl your way out, which a ton of people did. Now, obviously, this is a PR nightmare. The communists have to explain to everybody why on earth they blocked off West Berlin and they're not letting anybody through. And because of that, they decide to give the Berlin Wall their name, the Anti-Fascist Rampart. Fascism, obviously referring to Nazis, which makes this, I believe, one of the first historical appearances of the unfortunately still prevalent line of thinking that anybody that disagrees with me or how I live my life or my politics must be a Nazi.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. You know, people like to think that our society around the world and everything has changed and whatnot. Nah, humans, we don't evolve that fast. Humans, couple hundred years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and so on, they might have spoken different languages, might have had different food, wore different stuff. But at the end of the day, they're still people, and they act like people. I mean, I'm pretty sure back when, during the first presidential elections and everything in the U.S., people were still making jokes about the other candidate's dick and stuff like that. We're still human. It's all the same. Just the way they express it can be slightly different, but you know what always works? Comparing your opposition to the worst thing that you could think of, and after World War II, that has pretty much always been, Nazis. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was the official stance of the Soviet Union, basically accusing every Western power of being a fascist regime and saying they built the wall to, quote, protect against fascist elements conspiring to prevent the will of the people, despite the fact that the apparent will of the people was to leave their communist regime.
Yeah, but they were brainwashed, obviously.
Excuse me, one more time. I'm so sorry. I just have to Google something real quick. How to recognize a cult. Absolute authoritarianism without accountability. Check. Zero tolerance for criticism or questions. Like getting arrested for political jokes, so I'm going to go with check. Lack of meaningful financial disclosure regarding the budget. Check. Unreasonable fears about the outside world that often involve evil conspiracies and persecutions. check. Okay, sorry. Anyways, back to the video. Despite all the problems.
But not a cult. Seriously, not a cult. Not at all a cult. The Founding Fathers were some of the most human of our politicians in history. Correct me if I'm wrong, but before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, not all of them probably, but a lot of the Founding Fathers go to a nearby bar, get fucking smashed, absolutely mangled in terms of how much they were drinking. And then, boom, they got kicked out of the bar, and then they went to go and sign the Declaration of the Declaration of Independence. They went to go sign it and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, they pre-gamed the signing of the Declaration of Independence. After the signing, they had a party for days. Okay, maybe it was just after. That would explain how they could still write their signature. But it's like, oh yeah, we just, signed, a thing that's going to maybe get our independence, maybe start a war, something like that. Let's go party, guys. Time to get absolutely smashed. So, like, you know what? As much as you could, they weren't perfect, obviously. Nobody is. But I can respect that. I can respect that.
Propaganda saying the Western world was literally just a bunch of Nazis. Most people in East Germany didn't buy it, and a ton of them still tried to escape to the West. Over the duration of the Berlin Wall, over 100,000 people.
True. Of course they partied. They had Ben Franklin. Dude, Ben Franklin. That man is the definition of, as the kids today say, Riz, because he was like fat and balding, I think at that time and whatnot, and he still had game. He went to France to get, assistance from the French army and the French royalty to help with their, fight against the British, because, hey, the French hate the British. Who doesn't? And gets there, and he's hitting on women left, right, and center. It's like, Ben, what have you been doing? What was I supposed to be doing? I forgot. I've been getting so much pussy, I forgot.
Would be captured and imprisoned for either telling political jokes, criticizing the government, or attempting to escape. In just a couple years, by 1964, these political prisoners were starting to stack up really quickly, and the USSR had to do something about it because it was costing them money and the prisons were full and they had to get rid of all these people. So, I mean, what's a communist regime to do? Well, that's easy. We've got all these prisoners that we don't want. They don't want to be here. Let's ransom them over to the West. And that's exactly what
just
they do.
Just make money from selling.
33,000.
Instead of letting people go, let's just sell them. It's a win-win. They get to go to the other side and we get money, even though we're communists. We're not supposed to be wanting money.
Political prisoners to the West, and the West paid on average 4,000 Deutschmarks per person. I say on average because it wasn't a static price. The USSR put different values on different people based on their skills and job set. For example, a general laborer might only bring 1,800 Deutschmarks, whereas a doctor could bring 15,000. Now, granted, I'm probably reading way too far into this, but I do find it a tiny bit hypocritical that the communist government, the same government that supposedly is striving to create a moneyless, classless society where everybody is equal, is also taking political prisoners, assigning different values on their life based on their ability to produce an economic output, almost like they're putting them into separate classes, implying that some people are worth more than others, and then they're turning around and trying to sell them to another government for money, which is allegedly something else they don't want, which is, weird. It's almost like it's all a bunch of talking points and bullshit so they can have a bunch of control.
No, but you see, they were doing it ironically. It was a social experiment, guys, okay? They did that to show how bad this is. Look, we're assigning value to these people, and then they're buying them. Look, we're doing it ironically. Trust us, but we're keeping the money. A socialist experiment. Yeah, it's a socialist experiment.
I can do this all day. How long? What is it going to take to convince you that communism is bullshit? Tell me.
Okay, like, I agree with him. I bet the people that don't agree with him are not watching his videos, though, so it's like, it's not going to do anything. I always find that, because it's so hard to get your point across to the people that you want to try convincing, because when you make a video about the topic, you know who's clicking on these videos? Not the people that are pro-socialism, pro-communism, and stuff like that. It's not. They don't click on these videos. So you just have people that agree with you, so you're not getting your point across. Nothing against Tim on this. He knows that, most likely. It's just an unfortunate nature of just how media is, of like, you try to convince people of something and you make a topic on it, they're not going to go and click on it.
Okay, I'll do it.
Your Honor, I object!
And why is that, Mr. Reed?
Because it's devastating to my case!
Overruled.
Good call!
In addition to the 33,000 political prisoners that the USSR essentially auctioned off for money, they also agreed to release 215,000 East German citizens for the low price of 2.3 billion Deutschmarks. Between 1945 and 1989, over 600 Germans were killed either trying to cross the border from East to West Germany or from East to West Berlin. And that is considered to be a very low, very conservative number because the USSR didn't want to release the actual numbers or admit that they'd killed anyone, because every single person they killed trying to escape communism was a huge political hit to them. Which raises the question, what happened in 1989? Well, that's the best part of the whole story. By 1989, the Soviet Union was going bankrupt. They were beginning to crumble. They were losing their sphere of influence, and more civil unrest started to occur. And by November of 1989 in East Germany, there were protests, people demanding that they had the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the ability to critique their government without getting arrested, and most importantly, the freedom of travel. The communist government knew that they had to give the people an inch before the people turned around and took a mile, and the 1 inch they were willing to give them was they were going to get rid of the travel ban and finally start granting people visas. They weren't going to charge them money, they weren't going to have some special circumstance to do it, and most importantly, they were actually going to approve people and they were going to do it quickly. These new travel regulations were drafted on November 8th, they were going to be announced to the public on November 9th on live TV, and on November 10th they would go into effect and people could show up to the passport office, apply, and ideally get accepted and have the freedom to travel west.
Wait, but how many people had TVs to even see the live TV announcement? I can't imagine that they had much of that at all. I could be wrong on that. I have no idea. But something I always find interesting about the fall of the Soviet Union is that I'm probably getting the agency that was in charge of it. Is it the CIA that's in charge of international stuff, or is that the FBI? Whichever one it is, they always overestimated how powerful the Soviet Union was. They did not anticipate the Berlin Wall going up. They did not anticipate the Berlin Wall going down, and they did not anticipate when the fall of the Soviet Union was coming. If they had the proper intelligence of what was going on within on the other side of the Iron Curtain, they would have known that the Soviet Union was not as big a threat as they had been treating it. They did not have as big of arsenal as they had. They had an arsenal, obviously. They weren't not a threat. But it was always being treated as so much more of a threat than they actually were, and they severely overestimated all of it. And they just did not know what was going on the other side of that Iron Curtain. So it was a good thing that everything worked out, and that their intelligence was not wrong in the opposite direction.
And that's kind of what happened. November 8th, the new regulations get drafted. That's fine. November 9th, they hand the new regulations to a government spokesperson by the name of Gunter Schabowski, and he's going to read them on a government press conference on live TV. He didn't have time to read through all the papers. Nobody took the time to explain it to him. So on live TV, he just kind of wings it.
We'll do it live. Fuck it.
He reads off what he thinks is important, which is just, here's the new rules that we're living by. And everybody's like pretty happy about it. And one journalist asks, when does this go into effect? And Gunter, not having time to have read through all the papers, kind of shuffles through them real quick, looking for an effective date, and which he doesn't see one. It's there, he just doesn't see it. So he just kind of shrugs and he's like, as far as I know, quote, immediately, without delay.
Das tritt nach meiner Kenntnis ist das sofort.
And with that, going out on live TV, East Germans got up and started going to the wall. Now, this announcement was at the ass end of a boring government press conference, so not a lot of people saw it, but the news outlets started picking it up, and they started airing it, both in East and West Germany, and then even more people started showing up on both sides of the wall. And within just a few hours, tens of thousands of people had shown up to Checkpoint Charlie, one of the main checkpoints for the Berlin Wall, to go from East to West, and they demanded to be let go because they had just been told by their government on live TV
you can't go
that
back
they
on
had the freedom of travel.
Even if it's wrong, you can't go back on it.
Had no idea what was going on, and they were outnumbered tens of thousands to one. And eventually the guards were forced to simply let people through, and then word spread that they actually let them through, and all of Berlin, both East and West, came out and had basically the biggest block party the world has ever seen, as a city that had been divided in half for 28 years was finally reunited. And then they celebrated this reunification by tearing down the wall that had separated them for so long. In conclusion, Germany after World War II is the closest thing to a controlled experiment that you you can have pitting capitalism against communism to see which one
that
would
wasn't real
triumph
communism.
in real life. They took one country with one people, divided it down the middle, and gave each a set of rules to live by. And while capitalism is far from perfect and it has a ton of things that we can improve upon, I think the results of this experiment speak for themselves. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out.
I agree. Capitalism has never had to build a wall to keep its people in. Literally one mistake destroyed the Berlin Wall. Yep. Also, thank you all for watching. Thank you so much. If you liked the video, consider liking it and leave any recommendations of videos you'd want me to watch in the future down in the comments below, and consider joining the Discord or coming by the Twitch stream. But until next time, y'all have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll see you next time.